Hi, everyone.
Hello, world. Welcome to the fifth episode of the Writers and Wonders podcast. I came across an interesting post the other day. This one just caught my attention because I found it really relevant as I'm trying to make progress with my manuscript, which is taking a long time. But it was asking the question about whether or not we should write what you know. And this person, and I can't really remember who it was or where exactly I saw it because my brain is flooded with so much social media these days. But the person was basically like, no, do not write what you know. And I was like, what? Because I feel like even though in some of my stories, nothing comes out literally from my experiences. Oftentimes, it's from what I have drawn on in life, just on an everyday basis. And so I thought that was an interesting point to discuss. How much should we write what we know or write what we shouldn't? And the person was saying, well, don't, because it doesn't challenge your creativity enough, or you stay in kind of a comfortable place. So you aren't really pushing
Mm.
yourself as a writer, or maybe you're not reaching out. Maybe because of that, some of your characters, especially your main character, isn't able to go places that might be more interesting or exciting. And it was kind of like, oh, right. So should I not be writing about the girl who met a Norwegian and then moved to Norway? That's just my real life. But yeah, so I don't know, Petra, especially in your case, since you have a finished manuscript right now and you're querying with it, how much of your story and maybe your main character's life is based on something you know.
Okay, so that's a very intriguing take on this, I think. The truth is that I think this statement or advice to write what you know is, I think in part is true, and I also think it's not true or something that you should do and not do at the same time. So I'm thinking that there's nothing wrong with writing what you know, in the sense that you use your experiences, use the people you met, the events that you had in your life, and use them to inform your writing and inspire your fiction. So I think that's absolutely useful. And I think I would even dare to say that first-time writers, I think, all do this to various extents, of course, but this is probably where we all start. But I also understand where this person is coming from regarding, your creativity and having the chance of basically writing more than what you've experienced specifically. And I think this is also a matter of writing what you know, maybe what you've lived through is another way to put it. And then there's the case of, or this other angle that we can call maybe the writer brain. And
Mhm.
the fact that I think writers have this, obviously they have a creative brain. Their imagination is off the charts sometimes. I think there are many novels out there actually that come from writers who have never lived through something that is actually in the book. It's really the end product of their imagination. And one idea or one example comes to mind, Emily Brontë and Wuthering Heights is, I think, could be an example here. And I'm happy to discuss this with listeners and people who watch this in the comment section if somebody have a different opinion. And I'm also interested in yours, of course. So as far as I know, Emily Brontë was very much a reserved person and didn't have that many human connections in her life, partly because of that place where they all lived, with the family, which was kind of like, I don't know, a place where they didn't have a big community. But, the things that she wrote in that book is very likely mostly the product of her imagination. And so she wrote things that she didn't know, particularly the parts that are very romantic or even kind of sensual, and all the stuff that is now have been used to inspire, the new movie, which is like not a direct adaptation, as we all know. But so I've seen people saying that this is so funny that, well, funny or whatever, it is like a kind of peculiar maybe, that this person wrote that book and there's this, I don't know, like a gap between her personality, her true life, her actual lived experience, and what is in the book. And so I think in her case, we can say that she definitely didn't write what she knew, yet we have this wonderful book as the result. So I just wanted to mention this, that I think both things can be possible here, both versions. As for me, in my book, in this first manuscript, I definitely wrote what I know and what I've lived through. So my life events and the people I met, the situations that I've been in, all informed or somehow inspired the story. But I already have this idea for a second book, and I think there I'm going to take a different route, because I think that book will demand, first of all, more research on my part, and more of my, I guess, my imagination. So that book is going to be different from that aspect. I mean, we'll still have to see, of course. Let's talk about this in a year or so. But yeah, so that's my take, basically. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, also for myself, I'm on my second manuscript right now, and I think that both stories for sure draw on like my personal experience or things that have happened in my life or that I've seen or I've heard about, or also maybe I wished would have happened in a situation,
Mm-hmm.
even though it wasn't what really happened. And I
That's
think that,
always a big one.
yeah, and I think that's because like it's comfortable and it's sort of like easy to draw on something that's already happened in terms of like writing about the detail, writing about like certain emotions. And so I think obviously there's no prescriptive answer to like, should you or should you not write what you know? Because I mean, there's so much great historical fiction out there, fantasy, like things that are not necessarily current or real. But I think there is something to be said about drawing from like your own point of view, your own perspective, and then enhancing that and sort of like elaborating on it. And that's the sort of the writer's detail and the creativity that probably Petra, you were just talking about. But it is interesting because I do think sometimes people get, I don't know if upset or maybe critical is the right word, but I know that I get a sense, especially these days, that people are readers or an audience can be quite judgmental if somebody writes about something that they do not know.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I don't know if you read Taylor Jenkins Reid, one of her more recent books. It's the one about the tennis star. Terry Soto's is back. She's written about this tennis star who's essentially making a comeback to defend her sort of record, her world record title, by beating it because there's some up and coming star who's about to, sort of eliminate her name in that achievement. And I enjoyed it. I like her books. And I remember reading an article or an interview that she did, and a lot of people were like, well, do you play tennis? Like, and there's also a lot of Spanish. The main character is a Spanish speaker, and I think was it from Argentina? or Spain. I can't remember. And so she got like a lot of criticism because she was writing in Spanish. There were lines in Spanish in the book. And I was thinking like, do we all have to be like Serena Williams to write like a book about tennis? Or does she have to be like have gone to tennis camp when she was like a teenager to be able to write about this? And she was like, well, no, I'm not a tennis player, but I think the interest for her to write this story was about the psychology of athletes and like also like that pressure that athletes are dealing with, which is very transferable to different professions or different, like, I'm not a cross country skier, and I don't shoot rifles, but it turns out I'm a huge fan of biathlon. I moved to Norway and like I find this like the most exciting thing. And there was of course a lot of drama about some of the biathletes during the Olympics. I don't know if you know, but anyway, like it doesn't mean I can't appreciate it, right?
Mhm.
So I thought it was really interesting that like she did get some criticism about like writing a story about main character and about the world of tennis and also using Spanish in the novel, even though she worked with like a Spanish editor to get it all correct. So, like write what you know, what you don't know, and like you kind of can't be right or you can be wrong, or people, I think, like to be critical in any case, right? Anyway, I found it an interesting story. And I went to tennis camp when I was like playing tennis when I was like 12, 13, something like that. But like,
Mhm.
does that qualify me more as a reader of the book? No. So yeah, I
Mm.
mean, take it as you like. So it's really writing about the perspective and she
Mhm.
did a ton of research for it, right? And I think she was reading some autobiographies of tennis players.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, if it's an interesting story, right? Like Lord of the Rings, where did that come from? It's like,
I hope
I'm
it
not,
wasn't a lived experience.
yeah, right? Like, I don't know, maybe in Norway we have trolls, so maybe like Tolkien was visiting Norway and ran into a troll. I don't know. Like, yeah. So,
I think what you mentioned about research is important. I wanted to bring that up anyway. I think all these writers who dive into a topic that is new for them are doing some level of research based on what what they say on in interviews um, and in their social media posts, and sometimes authors talk about how they actually got to write that certain book. And so they often talk about how they, I don't know, like for example there's this romance writer, Alina Armas, who, like, in one of her books the character is very much into pottery, and so she uh, repeatedly talked about how she started to take pottery classes to know what that's like, because she hadn't done it before that. And by the way, as far as I know, I think she mentioned that that's one of her hobbies now. So she's like really going with it even after the publish of that book. So she did that kind of research. Other writers interview certain experts or people who have the experiences that the author is curious about, and that can find a way into the book. And so I'm certain that, just to defend writers, I guess, they put in some kind of research, and it's not like just let's wing it and I'm gonna imagine what it's like to be a tennis player, and when I really have no information or even like a basic idea of what that's like. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that I know people can get so critical about certain professions not being portrayed well, either in a book or in movies, TV shows, which is just so funny to me, because I don't know, like there are so many books, movies, TV shows, all of these where that's my personal example. I see people who work in marketing and PR and they work in these big at these big agencies, and none of those are accurately portrayed. And I know
Hmm.
this because I've been living in that world for most of my adult life. I've worked as a marketing professional, a PR person, and this agent, that agent, social media, all of it. And that's not the full picture that you're getting in a movie or even in a book, which can be, more detailed and longer in a way. And I'm not angry about that because I know there are limitations. And also when it's fiction, I'm more I'm just fine with it. So I'm also not a hugely critical person. That should be mentioned. That's, again, I think a personality thing for many people that, if they can find even just one bit, one line or one scene in a movie that is somehow incorrect, they will just, jump on it. And that's all they can see, like after that. Yeah. So I think we shouldn't be probably that critical to a certain extent. I mean, I'm sure I don't have any examples right now, but there are times when things can be very inaccurate and can also be a problem. Just as a vague example, I'm just thinking of maybe if something is not portrayed in a right way from a cultural point of view, for example, and if that thing is like maybe hurtful to certain groups or certain cultures or not an accurate representation of certain people, then obviously that's a problem. If we're talking about whether the person who is a tennis star in a book is, I don't know, holding the tennis racket in a way that's not pretty accurate when wouldn't happen in real life, I think we can be fine with that. I think people have to balance these things out.
Yeah, I think what you were saying earlier about when you see like your profession portrayed in books or on TV, it made me think of actually Emily in Paris, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever watched. I haven't watched all the seasons, just because there's so much that I mean to watch. But I also I lived and worked in Paris, not in marketing, not in that field, but like I also know what it's like to live in Paris. And this sort of like with her outfits and her lifestyle, like that's like not really how it works in Paris, you know?
Yeah.
And certainly I can't imagine, like on her salary. But like if you start to think about like all these real world sort of like, then you kind of also take away from that like creative aspect or like the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people just watch the show and like appreciate her ridiculous outfits, right? Because it's kind of like back in the Sex and the City days, like with Carrie and all of them in New York.
Exactly.
She couldn't have, I mean, speaking of like a struggling writer, right? Like she could not have afforded. I think there's this time when she was like, yeah, I bought the Vogue instead of like eating lunch or something like that. Or
Mm-hmm.
when it comes time to maybe buy her apartment, it turns out she's invested $40,000 in Manolo Blahniks and no savings, right? But it's really like the relationship, right, that you develop with some of these main characters, or like you
Mm-hmm.
appreciate them for that ridiculousness, or like you appreciate that part of the world that we all sort of kind of wish or want, even though it's not very practical, it doesn't exist. But isn't that the whole point sometimes of when we read books or when we watch something on TV, like that you're allowed to like have a certain element of that, right? And
Yes.
I mean, of course, I agree with you when it comes to probably representations of historical fiction or of certain cultures, religions, wars. Like there are things that you can't be so inaccurate about that they
Mm-hmm.
would be offensive. But yeah, like, what's wrong with like a ridiculous polka dot hat that you would wear to a British ascot race? in the middle of an okay or something like that. What's wrong with that? She looks stupid and she would get, mugged, but it looks cute, right?
Yeah. It was the same thing with the Friends TV show that I grew up on. And I've never once given a thought to the reality of it and whether those people can afford those apartments. And
Yeah.
then, at one point in my adult life, I noticed that people were kind of pointing that out, that that's not realistic. And then I was like, oh, yeah, right. But that never stopped me from enjoying the show. And also the other day, there was this bookstagrammer guy who recorded a video saying that, am I the only person who just reads the books and doesn't really critiques them? Because he also has this impression that people are now so critical and they feel that they have this huge space online where everyone can express their opinions, and that so people read a book and then it's almost like instead of enjoying the reading process, they get hung up on little details which might be inaccurate, or they find these elements of the book, the character or the plot line or whatever it is, maybe a piece of a dialogue that is like, no, this would never happen, and then they go online and critique it and like endlessly. And so he was asking this question, and I could really resonate with that am I the only one who just reads the books and
Mm.
just enjoys them? And like, why do we have this need to find a problem with everything? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've heard before, when you're writing, like, don't assume your reader is stupid, right?
Yeah.
So when you're writing and sometimes you end up writing like so much detail or like everything has to be so logical and explained that you do it in a way because you think, oh, your reader is not going to be able to like kind of skip some parts of the scene and be able to like understand and like make the story, So don't. And then she walked down the hall and switched the light on and then made a right turn into the bedroom, took 3 steps forward before reaching. Like, don't overdo that. And so I think when you give authors and writers that credibility to tell a story, right, as a reader, then you also have to, as a reader, like let them get away with certain details, or maybe part of those details are also a creative element. So, yeah, let's sometimes give ourselves a break as well as we, write the stories and then others read them. So,
And also, let's be honest, the other side of this is that readers don't need those details because they don't care.
yeah.
Truly, like, especially if we tie this back to how certain professions are portrayed in fiction or movies and TV shows, people don't care about the details of a PR agent. Or I remember, like, in my first manuscript, the main character is a PR agent. And I remember the times when I was trying to figure out how to, represent her in the book. And being a person who comes from that world, I know what's the difference between being a PR agent, someone who is a marketing manager, somebody social media. And so there are all these variations, and I know the nuances, the differences, and at a certain point, also on my own, but then with the help of this editor, I realized that I'm the only one who cares about this,
Yeah.
because I know these details, but people who are absolutely not part of this world, communications, marketing, PR, however you want to name it, they don't need those differences. They don't care. Everyone has a kind of, like, in their imagination, they know something about what a PR agent would do. But most of the time, marketing, PR, promotion, this kind of campaign, that kind of campaign, that's just all the same in a person's head who is not coming from that word, which is totally fine. But this just signals to me that I don't have to overthink this. And so just to tie back to what you said, that you also don't need those details because the reader doesn't need it because they don't care. You don't have to pinpoint everything and then give these detailed bullet points about certain things in your writing. And now I'm just thinking about how we got here from Write What You Know, the original topic.
Yeah. In that case, maybe you don't have to write what you know. I
Yeah.
guess the point that we're both kind of making is that, I mean, you can write what you know. You can also write what you don't know. And maybe it's more about sort of the perspective that you present and also the kind of how you draw your reader, and how, it's also about the story, and how you want to push your main character to draw the reader's attention. And these things can stem from anything, right? Something you know, something you don't know, something you wish. There are many stories that I often read and I'm like, but you're rooting for the main character because you want this to happen or this not to happen. And that's kind of what keeps you reading, right? Keeps you following that story. So that can be something you know or something you don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's honestly the best when it's equal parts what you know, your research, and then also your imagination. I think that's possibly the best combination. So I wouldn't um, fully agree with the statement to write what you know, but I at the same time I also wouldn't say write what you don't know. I think it's that middle ground that you should aim for, or this is my experience as well, that this is what I'm trying to do, and so far I think it's been working. Just me as a writer, I haven't published anything yet, so I still need the external feedback, so to speak, in that matter regarding what feels right to me as a writer when I'm working on a story. This is, I think I'm on using a kind of like the combination of the two words.
Yeah, and I would agree. It can be what you know or what you don't know, but it's ultimately it's about your story and your characters and how you push that reader to keep following in your story and wanting to get to the end. So I think that's the important thing, and that's kind of the point. So I don't know, like maybe I don't want to get like too Nike about it, but like just write, you know, just do it.
Yeah, but right now we're kind of doing what we always hear in publishing, like how people say something and then they add, but do what you want to do. So it's like, but it's up to you. It's like there are always exceptions. These are the things that you hear, whether that's like trying to find an agent, querying, or just writing a prologue or not. Or yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, but it's your decision, and there are always exceptions. So I think here too as well, like it's your decision, right? What you know, what you don't know, the combination of the two, whatever. Ultimately, it really is true that you have to see what works for you and what is it that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a good point to kind of end for today. For anybody else who's caught on and listening right now, we hope you are also putting your writer's cap on and writing what you know, what you don't know. And also, as readers, let the writers have the grace to present the story based on what they know or what they don't know. So we wrap up here. And thank you to the listeners.
Yes, and thank you for anyone watching us on YouTube. And also, please follow us on our socials. We have a TikTok, we have Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube, of course, and then you can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. And so, yeah, this was episode 5 of the Writers and Wonders podcast, and let's meet in the next one.